Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to week 8 of Flourish. I hope everybody has had a good Memorial Day. Obviously, this is a recording because we're not doing a live uh, meeting tonight because Best Health office is closed. But anyway, hopefully you're viewing this video now and will enjoy it as you go through it. Okay. So you can see here on week 8, we are going to be in the Nutrition Flourish Foundation, specifically looking at how to read food labels. Now, uh, your eighth tracker is due. So if you're unable to submit it today on Memorial Day, definitely make sure you submit it over the next couple of days so you can make sure that you get credit for that. I did send that tracker out this morning. So if you don't see it in your inbox, check your spam or your junk folder, and it should be in that. So we're going to go ahead and get started for the day. Uh, what we're going to do, just like each week, we're going to recap last week's topic and target. And then we're going to get on the topic of the day, which is specifically looking at reading food labels. And after that, we will give you the target for the upcoming week and then remind you about next Monday's tracker. And of course, it's on my PowerPoint. I obviously won't be available to answer any questions unless you would like to email those to me separately. All right. Now, I jumped ahead. So, recapping last week, if you do recall, we looked at three of the Flourish foundations uh, in one presentation. We looked at stress, we looked at sleep, and we looked at relationships. Specifically, if you remember, we looked at how stress affected our bodies, also the factors that contribute to our stress, and then we looked at some tips on self care. Okay, basically how that we can effectively manage, reduce our stress. We also looked at the effects of poor sleep and then some tips on how to improve our sleep quality and our quantity. And then lastly, we looked at the importance of relationships. Uh, and from that, we looked at ways that you could build your community to help build those strong relationships. And then lastly, we just kind of uh, gave you some information on some different resources that you may need in relation to these foundations. All right. So, recapping that, also looked at last week's target. And last week's target was to choose stress, sleep, or relationships. And the target specifically was to think of two barriers that you may have and two ways that you can improve that foundation. Of course, since we're not live, this is a question that I can pose to you that you can, reflect on that. And it says, what is one specific way that you made improvement in one of the three foundations? So hopefully you had a chance since we met the previous week to kind of think of at least one of these barriers that you may have to one of these foundations and at least one way to improve that foundation. All right. So we're going to go ahead then and jump to the topic of the day, which is reading food labels. Now, this information is in your booklet. What we're going to do, we're going to start off first on this slide talking about the purposes and the requirements of food labels. After that, the following slides, we're actually going to kind of dissect each portion of the nutrition facts label, essentially telling you how that you can use these food labels to make informed choices. All right. So first off, you have several purposes on food labels. The first is food labels allow you to make quick, informed decisions to help choose healthy foods and beverages. So again, you see two words there, quick and informed. And the second purposes of food labels is that it provides you with facts for nutrients that impact common health concerns such as weight control, diabetes, and hypertension. And as you can see here on the PowerPoint, blocked off in red, you can see those nutrients that are required to be placed on food labels. And that would be your total fat, saturated fat, trans fats. And if you remember, we talked about that several weeks ago, cholesterol, sodium, your total carbohydrates. And out of those total carbohydrates, they're required to put how much dietary fiber and total sugars that's in that food product. And also with the total sugars includes a combination of both your naturally occurring sugars that you find in fresh fruits and dairy products, and it also includes those added sugars, so those empty calories. And luckily, they do flush out under total sugars how much of those sugars are actually added sugars. And then also another important nutrient that is required to be added on a nutrition facts panel is protein. And then you have 1 vitamin and 3 minerals that are required to be put on the food labels. That's vitamin D, calcium, iron, and potassium. Now, it is voluntary if manufacturers do want to add additional information to the food label. That's strictly up to them. For example, it's up to the manufacturer if they want to add in those healthy fats. Remember those mono and polyunsaturated fats. Also, it's up to the manufacturer if they want to list out the 2 types of dietary fibers. For example, soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. And then also it's really up to the manufacturer if they want to add additional vitamins and minerals that may be found in that food. But what you see here, what I just kind of went over, is the basic requirements in relation to the nutrients on that food label. All right, then you look at the requirement, and this is from the FDA and the USDA. Food labels are required to be placed on all packaged foods and beverages. So any food that's in its natural state that has then been packaged, or minimally or heavily processed, it has to have a food label on that. Okay. Now, you will see that food labels are not required to be put on raw produce, such as your fresh fruits and your fresh vegetables, and also fresh fish. So those are requirements and the purposes of your food labels. All right, so now what we're going to do, we're going to now dissect each portion of the food label and how you can use that to make quick, informed decisions. All right, now with the food label here, we're first going to kind of dissect and look at the servings per container. So on a food label, they are required to put how many servings are in the container. And servings per container will be the total number of servings in the entire package or food or container. Now, when you see this example here, this example says it has 8 servings in this one container. All right. Now, it also is required to tell you the serving size, And the serving size is the amount of food most people typically eat at one time, but it's not a recommendation on how much you should actually eat because that can be individualized. Okay. Now, if you see with this example here, it says the serving size is 2/3 of a cup. 2/3 of a cup. And typically with serving sizes, they record or place on that food label what is typically the common household measurements. It could be cups, teaspoons, tablespoons, etc. And then it's followed by a metric amount like grams. Okay. So with this example here, it tells you the servings per container and it tells you the serving size of that actual food. Again, those are two things that are required to be placed on a food label. And also, when you're comparing similar food items or similar food products, you also do want to make sure you line up the serving size to make sure they equate to the calories in that serving size. That's important. All right. So now let's look and go down the food label at the calories per serving. This is also required to be placed on the food label. And calories per serving will be the total number of calories or quote unquote energy supplied from all of your sources. So your dietary fats, your carbohydrates, and your proteins. Those are your three essential nutrients that provide you with energy in the form of calories. All right. So again, servings per container, the total number of calories or energy supplied from all your sources in one serving of the food. And that's very important to note because you can see, according to this example, there are actually 8 servings in this one container. And the calories for just one serving, based on this example, is 230 calories. If you were to eat a second serving of this food product, well, you would have to double the amount of calories that you are consuming. Okay, so servings per calories per serving are required to be placed in that food item. And again, that's what you can look at when you're comparing similar food products as well. You can compare the calories to see if one is higher or lower than the other. And again, always base it on that serving size to make sure they're equal as well. All right, now to keep going down the food label, if you look at a food label like this example here, you see over to the right hand side of the nutrients all the percentages. That's called a percent daily value. And the percent daily value tells you how much a nutrient, say, for example, saturated fat. So it tells you how much a nutrient in a serving of the food contributes to a total daily diet. It helps you determine if a serving of the food is high or low in an individual nutrient, and it helps you to compare food products. Now, this is the general rule of thumb you see right here related to the percent daily value. It says 5% of your daily value or less of a nutrient, say saturated fat, say dietary fiber or added sugars. So 5% of your daily value or less of a nutrient per serving is considered low. Whereas 20% of your daily value or more of a specific nutrient per serving is considered high. So the question is, well, which nutrients do I need to get a low percentage in, and which nutrients do I need to get a high percentage in? Well, glad you asked, because it tells you here. So the nutrients on the food label that you want to get more of in your diet would be dietary fiber, and the vitamin D, the calcium, iron, and potassium. Those are the nutrients that you want to make sure that percent daily value is high. All right. Now, the nutrients that you want to get less of in your diet, okay, again, that rule of thumb, 5% or less is considered low. So the nutrients that you want to get less in your diet would be the saturated fat, the trans fat, the sodium, and the added sugars. And then you could probably throw in also cholesterol there. So again, more or less with those nutrients in relation to those percent daily values. And that's another way that can help you make a quick, informed decision about your food products that you're consuming or that you're choosing, other than just looking at calories. You may say, well, you know what? I learned in this class that I need to reduce saturated fat in my diet. Well, what you can do when you grab a food item, turn it over, look at the nutrition facts panel, look under saturated fat, look at that percentage. And if that percentage is 5% or less per serving, that means that would be low in that unhealthy saturated fat. All right. Now, let's just say if you get a food product and you're trying to lower that added sugar in your diet, which is just empty calories, you want to make sure that that percent daily value is low. So it's 5% or less. And again, that's where you can do some comparative shopping of similar items and compare those added sugars. Say look at dietary fiber and see the percentage and make sure that percentage is high. And again, you can do some comparative shopping there. Okay. So again, not only looking at calories per serving, but definitely use those percent daily values as a very quick way to make an informed choice with your foods. All right. Now, there is another way, or in addition to the nutrition facts label, you can use the ingredients list as a helpful tool to make good choices. And if you can see here on the PowerPoint, the ingredients list shows each ingredient in a food by its common or usual name. Now, the ingredients are listed in descending order of quantity. That means the highest contributor to the product is listed first, and the least is listed last. So if you look at that example we see here on the PowerPoint, the first ingredient says chicken bone broth. Well, based on the information there, the chicken bone broth is the highest contributor of this food product. And then when you jump all the way down to that ingredients list, the last thing on the ingredients list says garlic extract, which is the least contributor to this food product. Okay. And then that very last tip on the ingredients list basically says find products with shorter ingredients list. Okay, that's always a good kind of helpful tip that you can use to guide your choices. Finding products with shorter ingredients list. All right, now what we're going to do, I'm just going to go through three kind of examples for you in relation to reading a food label. All right, so the first one here, it says, if you eat approximately 60 crackers, so this is an example of crackers. If you eat approximately 60 crackers, how many calories would you be eating? Well, one thing you need to look at, it says the serving size is 27 crackers. So let's just kind of round it up to a serving size is 30 crackers. You can see for those 30 crackers, they're 150 calories. Well, if you were to eat double that, so 60 crackers, then you would get 300 calories. If you doubled the servings, you would double those calories. Yes. All right. So let's look at the other example, which is Campbell's chicken noodle soup. Chicken noodle soup. And of course, here, this is going to be an example of sodium. You know, sodium is one of those nutrients. Yes, we do need sodium, but we need a moderate amount of sodium in our diet daily. We don't need a high amount. And again, that's where you can use that percentage daily value to help you. So the question says approximately how much sodium is in 1 cup of Campbell's chicken noodle soup? Well, if we look at the food label, it does say that the serving size is half of a cup. Half of a cup. Well, the question is asking you how much sodium is in 1 cup. So in a half a cup, there's 410 milligrams of sodium. Well, we're going to consume 1 cup, so we're going to double that. That means the amount of sodium that we would consume if we consume 1 cup of this soup would be approximately 800 milligrams. All right. And then the last example here is looking at potato chips. All right. And of course, we've got it blocked off in red here, the amount of dietary fiber in 1 package, small package of the potato chips, which says 1 gram. Remember, dietary fiber is one of the nutrients that we want to get more of in our diet. So we want to see that percent daily value number to be higher. Based on this example, it says it's 5% of your daily value. Remember the general rule of thumb for percent daily values. 5% of your daily value or less of a nutrient per serving is considered low, where 20% of your daily value or more of a nutrient per serving is considered high. So this question here says, look at the percent daily value for dietary fiber. Is this amount high or low? Well, you see the 5% rule, okay, because it tells you that the dietary fiber, the percent daily value of this small package of potato chips is only 5%. That means the answer is low. This product is low in dietary fiber, and dietary fiber is something that we want a higher percentage. Okay. All right, so that wraps up our examples, and now that takes us to our target for this upcoming week, and that is to make informed food choices by reading food labels, So when we meet next week live, I'll just ask you some questions about, do you have an example of reading a food label? Were you able to maybe lower some calories for those similar products? Maybe you were able to increase your dietary fiber with similar products by looking at the food labels, or decreasing the saturated fat or the sodium, et cetera, or decreasing those added sugars. So hopefully you'll have some examples for me next week, and we can go over that. And then next week, the topic is going to be about planning. That's going to be the key word: planning meals, planning your movement, and planning your mind. So kind of mindfulness with your behaviors. All right. And then next Monday, like I always do, I will email everybody the next tracker. I think that'll be tracker number 9. And you'll submit that the day of class next week. All right. Whoa. All right. That concludes the class today. Like I said, still submit the tracker today. If you don't submit it today, if you happen to be off on Memorial Day, that's fine. You can look back in your inbox and pull up the tracker that I sent you this morning. And make sure you do submit that before next week's class so you can get credit for that. Other than that, I hope y'all have a great rest of your Memorial Day, great week. Think about reading those food labels to make it quick and informed decisions. If you do have questions for me, definitely shoot me an email and I will get back to you. All right. So, y'all have a great day and see y'all next week.